Okay, so two sessions in this workshop. I really am sorry that Dr. Joe Ray, who's a psychologist, is not able to join us. She's had a bit of a hiccup today. Well, she had a hiccup earlier in the week. So she sent me the research pieces, and I have pulled together the talk because the two of us have worked together on development a huge amount over the years. So I've been able to bring in that experience, but also she's given me some extra pieces of information. So we're talking about early years development here because obviously this is the 0 to 6 year olds, but also because there's more development that happens in the first 5 years of a child's life than at any other time. So they do so much developing in this time, and clearly the children that we work with are actually that I work with, but are your children are going through a huge amount during that time. We have one young person with us now. Which is nice to see. But
Yeah, his head. He has dwarf.
um, we're going to talk a little bit about the development of the children in the early part of their life and why children with a single ventricle heart might have some hiccups and what we can potentially do about them. So, this is the development journey for the first 5 years of a child's life. And these are standardized sorts of things that might happen along that development journey. And I know that when you see your health visitor, she is measuring your child against this sort of pattern. All right. Now, I don't think that's particularly fair because we know that the first year of a child with a single ventricle heart is not exactly easy, is it? You know, most of them have two stages of surgery. So I want to talk a little bit about what might interrupt their development if they have a single ventricle heart, and then we'll look a little bit more at what potentially can be done. So I've got all sorts of things happening here as I'm trying to move my slides on, which is not good. Right. So many of the children are born prematurely. Now, it may be that there's a child who is induced early because they want to have some sort of control over when a baby with a single ventricle heart is born. That sort of prematurity is not too much of a problem. That's only a couple of weeks, and we know babies can be born anytime from 38 weeks to 42 weeks, and that's fairly standard. We're talking about where prematurity is where the baby is potentially come 6 weeks before they should, and then you have a problem with prematurity. Babies with low oxygen saturation rates. Now, we know that every child with a single ventricle heart has a low oxygen saturation, and they certainly have a low oxygen saturation for the first few years of their life. So we know that can affect their development. Poor nutrition. The reason that dietitians spend so much time trying to get the feeding right with a baby and child with a single ventricle heart is we know poor nutrition can affect their development, which is why mixed feeding is very often the best way to help one of these children. Genetic conditions. Again, we know that many heart conditions go alongside genetic conditions. And so you would be looking for something like 22q deletion, where you might see a set of developmental problems. If they have a complex medical condition, well, I'd sort of put single ventricle hearts into that group. I do absolutely feel that that children with a single ventricle heart have a problem just because their bodies are dealing with a huge amount of complexity around their condition. Prolonged periods of time in hospital, unusual, on intensive care for long periods of time, ventilated for long periods of time, away from a normal environment where development can be easy, really happens a lot for our children in the first year of their life. Prolonged ventilation and bypass machines. So, they've had surgery done. They're on a bypass machine for that. They might be on ECMO post surgery. They will definitely be ventilated for a period of time after surgery. And we know that if that carries on for too long, and in some cases that's needed, that can affect development. Medications can again affect development. Um, so we do know that, sorry, Joy's sending me messages at the minute. I do apologize. My eyes go somewhere else. I'll switch my phone off. Medications can cause a problem with development. Certain medications, it's not that development won't happen, but it might just alter how quickly they happen. Some of the really strong medications that a child has post-surgery that help support the heart can mean that the brain goes into protective modes and shuts itself down slightly. So what are the signs of a developmental delay? So there might be delays in tummy time. Really, babies who've had chest surgery find a tummy time can be challenging for them until they've really healed. They may be slow to roll over. They may be slow to sit up. They may be slow to crawl or walk. They may have problems with fine motor skills where picking up small things and using small things is hard for them. We certainly know that that can affect holding a pencil as they get older, potentially holding knives and forks. That can be a bit of a problem. Delays to eating independently, again, partly because of the way that they get food to themselves, actually knowing how to feed themselves. Delays in potty training. Now, that is also affected by the medications that they can be on, but it's very common for our children to be later to potty train. Problems understanding what people say. It's not so much that they don't necessarily understand what somebody says, but it's remembering what they've said and following an instruction. We know that can be a problem. They have problems with problem solving. So, you give them a puzzle to do, a simple puzzle, and they may find the visualization and the hand movement and the brain involvement difficult to coordinate. They have issues with social skills. Sometimes they find playing with other children difficult. Sometimes they find communicating with people difficult. And so we know that there can be delays around their social skills. They can have problems talking or they'll talk late. This does not occur in every child. Remember, not all of these things occur in every child, but we certainly know that some children are almost selectively mute for a period of time, whilst their heads get around everything that's going on with them. They have difficulty remembering things, which I have already raised. Getting information from short-term into long-term memory can be a problem. They have an inability to connect actions with consequences. So sometimes people say they're a little bit like daredevils, they run at something or they go and do something without a fear. And that's because they don't associate an action with some sort of consequence. But children with single ventricle hearts do develop. They will smile. They will do tummy time. They will learn to potty train. They will learn to use a fork, a spoon, a knife. They'll learn to ride a bicycle. They will also learn to hold a pencil. So it's not that these things are impossible for them. It's just that there is a delay for some of them in being able to do them. So I know you're going to say, does every child have a developmental delay? Not every child has a permanent developmental delay. So most of the children will develop within what is deemed as the normal developmental window. So some children walk at 9 months, some children walk at 18 to 20 months. Our children, single ventricle children, are more likely to develop to walk towards the 20 months than they are towards the 9, because they've had so much interrupting that normal developmental pattern. If a child is showing signs of delay, what sort of delay might it be? So physical delay would be crawling, walking, running, gross and fine motor control. Talked a little bit about some of those a minute ago. Cognitive is the thinking, the recognizing things, retaining information. Creative, an ability to imagine, create things and concepts and to innovate. Children through play do a lot of imagining, and they create things, and they will take themselves into a corner and they will be in a spaceship and they're going off to space, or they will be looking after a family with a baby in a cot. Now the children with a single ventricle heart may well do those things, but they might just take a little bit longer before they do. Emotional. Sometimes they have problems expressing how they're feeling about things, how they express how they're upset, how they express that they're happy, how they express their content. It takes a little while for them to be able to express those things clearly. Social. And the social is an ability to interact with others. Now, one of the things I do find very often is that children with a single ventricle heart very often smile at people, adults, really quite readily because they've been surrounded by them a lot in their early childhood. But they're less happy, potentially, unless they've got lots of brothers and sisters around, to interact with other children. That can take them longer. If a child has more than one of these areas of delay permanently, if they're there for a short period of time and they're gradually developing, it's not a problem. But if they have more than one of these permanently, it would be classed as a global developmental delay, which means there's more than one area of delay for them. So who's watching for the delay? So health visitors, when they do their health visitor checks, they're looking to see what a child is doing at different stages. When you have your red book ticks, so they're watching for it. GPs are watching for it as well. If you're going to see the GP regularly, they may be picking something up. If your child is under a pediatrician, and I like children to be under a pediatrician as well as a cardiologist. Cardiologists are very good at looking at the heart. That's what they're there for. Pediatricians look at the whole child and they look at the development for that child. So they are, if very often you'll be referred to a pediatrician as well as your cardiologist, and that can be a really good thing. The specialist nurses, if you're talking to the specialist nurses regularly, they may be able to pick up where they think there might be some sort of delay. And you are watching for delay, okay? Don't measure your children against your other children necessarily. It'll give you an indicator, but don't measure them against your other children or other children of their age. So, if you're in a mum and baby group, don't worry if your child is not doing exactly the same thing as other children of their age. As long as they are gradually developing, they will be playing catch up. If you can see a big delay, then you need to seek help. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. So what can be done to reduce the risks of developmental delay? So good nutrition in early childhood. So not just when you've got a nasogastric feed and all that extra milk's going in, and that's good stuff, but also when you're weaning. We all know that children like sweet things and savoury things, very savoury. So they like crisps and they like sweets. And no one is saying they shouldn't be having treats, but they need a lot of protein. They need vegetables. I know that is like an evil word for many children, but veg is good. They need a good amount of carbohydrate. They need the pastas and the rice and the potatoes, because that will give them energy. The nutrition in protein will give them ability to grow. We need protein to grow. And the vegetables give you all those vitamins, which are essential to ensuring that every part of your body is working well. A little bit of salt is okay, not too much because they've got a heart condition. A little bit of sugar and spice is absolutely fine. In fact, one of the things we find is that children like spicy food, they like strong cheese, because the medications knock off their taste buds a little bit. So therefore they can be more interested in something with a little bit more flavour than potentially another child of their age would be. I mean, olives, curries, things like that. We find a lot of the kids eat blue cheese. Now, many adults don't like blue cheese till they're quite a bit older, but children like those strong tastes quite early on. So you have to think slightly differently about their nutrition. Maintaining good oxygen sats. Now, they can be lower than normal, but we want them to be within the range that your medical team are setting. And if you are worried about that, then you need to speak to them. Okay. If you're, I don't know if you've got SATS monitors at home, some people do. You don't need to have a SATS monitor at home. You can tell by the look of your child very often how blue they might be, how cyanosed, and you know that their SATs are going to be slightly lower than normal. If that carries on for long periods of time and the doctors don't know about it, then it's useful to tell them, because if they can improve that saturation, they will. There are certain times in a child's life where it can't be improved. When they're growing to the point where they need their Fontan, for instance, very often their SATs are falling slightly. They know that they need to be doing their Fontan within a certain period of time to help. Now, low SATs transiently are fine. It's when it's constant that it then starts causing a bit of a problem for the brain. Early intervention. Now, Joe Ray and I have worked a lot on studies that are predominantly international studies, where the Americans are saying we need to get intervention in as early as we can. And if you're seeing that your child is delayed and it's continuing for a long period of time, always speak to your medical team. It can be your GP, it can be your cardiac team, because they can introduce you to a pediatrician who will start to look at the development and will start to look at what interventions could be useful. So what can you do to support a child? So physically, they can get support from physiotherapists and occupational therapists. And we know that some children who perhaps taking longer to sit, longer to stand and walk, will need some intervention to help them do it. Doesn't mean they're not going to do it. It just means that it might take longer. Things like riding a bicycle, even walking on a wall. You know how kids love to walk on a wall and hold someone's hand? That balance can be thrown out by the slow physical development. So it's very, very important that the children are doing those things supportedly and you're encouraging those sorts of development. So that can be really useful. Cognitively, if you see that a child is not developing with their play in the way they would normally do, it might be that seeing a play therapist is useful. It could be that going into a specialist nursery where you can get that added support will be useful. Nurseries are very good places for children for lots of reasons. I mean, they do pick up every bug in the history of man, but which, they're going to get at some point in their life, but sometimes it's good to avoid, especially if you're heading towards some sort of surgery. But in the main, nurseries are good because they're interacting with other children, which is very useful. But nursery leaders, nursery nurses, nursery teachers are very, very good at spotting where there's delay. And they will then start to be putting in play that will help a child develop. And it can be within a normal nursery setting. It doesn't need to have to be somewhere special. If the children aren't showing signs of improved development, then you would call in an occupational therapist who might help you with different tools that you can use, and then an educational psychologist. So we wouldn't need an educational psychologist right at the beginning of this process. We know the children will have some delay. But if you're seeing that the delay is not, they're not gradually developing and they're not picking up, then having that referral can be useful. Again, creative. And we're talking about creative play, imaginative play, support from specialist play therapists, preschool teams, nursery nurses. Those sorts of care can be really helpful because they can help encourage that sort of play and help the child to develop that in their brain cognitively, because it might not come there naturally. You need to encourage it. Doing puzzles and things at home, playing games which are interactive together can be really helpful. Emotionally, again, play therapy can help. We know that repeated surgery for children, repeated tests in the hospital throw the children tremendously. They hate it. And, if they've got to have blood tests, they have to have scans done, ECGs, they get worried. And so getting some psychology help in there, getting some play therapy in there can be really helpful, especially when you've got the lead up to some big surgery like the Fontan. Social. Again, being in a social situation where they're in a nursery and they're being encouraged to socialize is brilliant. If you find that there's still some delay with speech, with an inability to play with their peers, it's useful to get some psychology or play therapy involved because they can help the children to develop their social skills. You do that at home every day. You know, as parents, you will be talking to your children, and brothers and sisters will also be talking to children with a single ventricle heart, and that can really be helpful. Sometimes brothers and sisters answer on behalf of a child with a heart problem, okay, or even a younger sibling, because they take the role as leader. Encourage them to help their sibling talk for themselves, okay? So you want to give them a job as the older brother or sister because you don't want to decry them that position. Having been the eldest of four, it's very important that you have that position in the world. But at the same time, help say to them, right, we really need to get them talking now. So instead of you answering, can you be the one that helps them to talk for themselves? So it's getting the children and the family involved as well. Grandparents are really important here as well because grandparents often have the time to sit and read to a child, to play games with a child. And so getting them involved in doing those things as well can be really helpful. So throughout, you need an understanding of what's going on, so always seek it. Seek it from your GP, from your health visitor, seek it from the cardiac team, the specialist nurses, and then if you've been referred to a pediatrician or you've got a play therapist involved, seek it from them. Because you need support throughout this as well as the child. Okay. So I'm going to close off my screen for a minute, stop sharing. Hopefully you're all going to pop up on the screen now. No, well, you are here, but not necessarily all on the same place.